What's up guys, it's Kristen from Anime Collective. So we've had a lot of awesome license announcements recently. Most recent being Keimono Jihen, we've also had Blue Lock, Alice in Borderland, Tokyo Revengers, and more. That being said, a lot's been checked off my wish list, but there's still so much more manga I'd love to see printed with English translation. So I'm currently in the process of learning Japanese right now, and if you guys have done that, you know it's a lengthy process. I'm currently learning hiragana, katakana, and kanji, so I can't quite read it just yet. That being said, I have purchased some volumes that I have been wanting to read. I'm gonna flip through those for you guys over the course of the video. With that all said, let's get into it. This first manga, Dondon by Yukinobu Tatsu, is quite the trip. This is one that a lot of people may already recognize because it was recommended by two of my favorite manga creators. Tatsuki Fujimoto, the creator of Chainsaw Man and Fire Punch, which I did an in-depth review of on the channel if you'd like to check it out, and Yuji Kaku, the creator of Hell's Paradise and Inuyashimon. This definitely makes sense because Yukinobu Tatsu was an assistant to both of them. There's a charm to Dondon that is undeniable, but man, this one really had me saying, what the hell am I reading, especially when I first got into it. Aliens obsessed with bananas and a turbo granny, that's all I'm gonna leave you with. Definitely not a bad thing though, because I loved every second of it. It's quirky and wacky, but in a lovable and funny way. Dondon is set in a world that has both sci-fi elements like aliens and supernatural elements like ghosts in it. Instead of focusing on one or the other, the two collide in this world, and this makes it unique and interesting. Currently, chapters of Dondon are released weekly in the Shonen Jump app, but it has yet to receive a physical release with English translation. It's only a matter of time before it gets one, and I can't wait to pick it up someday. I want to show some love for manhwa, especially for Bastard, which is not only one of my favorites, but is also one of my most wanted print releases. Bastard is the manhwa I'd love to own physical copies of the most, but there are so many more that I'd love to see as well, including The Horizon, Weak Hero, The Boxer, Tower of God, and more. And with series like The Breaker, Solo Leveling, The Hellbound, and Killing Stalking getting print releases, more are sure to be on their way. If you are looking for a dark series, there's a lot to choose from in the creators of Bastard's work as a whole, whether it be together a manhwa like Bastard and Sweet Home, or their works with others such as Shotgun Boy and Pigpen. I actually enjoy them all, but Bastard is a favorite of mine because it's about a boy named Jin Seun, whose father that everyone thinks is a saint is far from such and is actually a serial killer. Since he was a young boy, Jin's father made him his accomplice. Tired of living in fear of his father and worrying about who he'll target next, Jin will either have to step up or continue to let him to get away with murder. I'll keep it at that because this is all mentioned in the synopsis, but of course there's a lot more to this story that makes it more intriguing as it develops, particularly as Jin's circle grows and he has something he wants to protect. There's a darkness to Bastard that is undeniable as you watch Jin's father, who does things like donate to charity and is seen as an unbelievably nice guy in the eyes of others, flip a switch once the doors close behind him and he's in the solace of his home. The creepy grin he gets will make your skin crawl. This one leans more so into the psychological side of things, so it really messes with your head as you read it, and there's a wickedness to his father that feels just all too real as well. Especially since this one is rooted in reality rather than fantasy. The boogeyman in this story isn't a supernatural monster, it's a father, a son, the guy next door, and is highly effective as a result. It's interesting to see the dichotomy that exists between his world and Jin Seun's. It's one of my favorite manhwa, and I hope it gets a print release with English translation someday. On top of more seasoned favorites, I wanted to add some newer releases as well that I can't wait to own physical copies of in this list. Togetki is one I haven't been able to get out of my mind as of late, and it's one I'd love to see translated. I like shonen that have an edge to them, and Togetki is definitely one of them, and I know it would be really successful in the US, especially given the manga that have blown up as of late. To me, this manga isn't generic despite what people are saying about it. I mean, yes, the MC is that slightly dense yet still managed to pull things off kind of guy. He's somewhat of a hothead as well, but ultimately has a kind heart. He reminds me a lot of shonen MCs like Shinra from Fire Force or Jiro from Black Torch, which are two series I love by the way. But the world that Togetki is set in is really cool and the abilities of the characters are unique. Togetki follows Shiki, who has Oni blood running through his veins, but he wasn't aware of this until a stranger enters his home one day and tries to assassinate him. Little does he know as well that his dad was part of the Momotaro Corporation, a clan that's long been at war with the Oni. He decided to take Shiki in and make him his son despite this. Later on, Shiki is recruited by Mudano Naito to become a student at Rakshasa Academy, a school for those who have Oni in their blood. This is where more characters, including students and teachers, come into play and the story becomes even more interesting. Great cast of characters and has awesome art too. As mentioned earlier, the abilities of the characters are really unique. For instance, a character named Jin, who is one of my favorites, has saw blades that come out of his arms. I really love the fact that Togenki is bloody and a bit more graphic than other shonen, which adds even more to its appeal for me. This is one that is just getting into the thick of things with only 7 volumes released in Japan so far. As you guys probably know with shonen, it generally takes some time before the story really picks up, given that there tend to be training arcs and whatnot, so I'm looking forward to seeing how this one develops. Togenki has shown massive potential, and there's so much about it I already love, so I hope it gets translated someday. Out of all the martial arts series that have yet to be translated, Kangen Ashra is the one I'd love to see translated most. Do you want to mention real quick though that I really want to see other titles like Baki get translated as well. I really enjoy both and want both, but there's just something about Kangen Ashra, its premise and its MC, Tokito Oma, that hooked me more. So in this story, something called the Kangen Association, an underground organization made up of influential companies, exists. Whenever they have a conflict, they choose a fighter and battle it out in an underground ring. In his endeavor to become the greatest martial artist, our main character Tokita Oma becomes the fighter for the Nogi group. The story follows him as well as his manager Kazo Yamashita as they work together to conquer the brutal world of Kangen. The fights are exaggerated and over the top in Kangen Ashra, which makes them thrilling, but yeah, I still found them to be believable. While still very much rooted in reality, the fighters in Kangen Ashra are larger-than-life characters that have incredible abilities. Their strength as a fighter is not only emphasized through their appearance and character designs, but the added elements surrounding them, whether it be an animal that represents their fighting style, an aura that surrounds them, etc. When it comes to any manga centered around sport or fighting, this is something I always enjoy because it showcases their abilities in a more abstract and interesting way. For these reasons and more, I really want to see Kangen Ashra released with English translation. Koko no Hito, also known as The Climber, is one I've long hoped for. It was released in Japan all the way back in 2007, and 17 volumes were released of the series. While we are on the topic of Shinichi Sakamoto though, I do want to mention that I'd also love to see Innocent and Innocent Rouge get translated as well. If I had to pick one of his works that I'd love to see most though, it would definitely be The Climber. The Climber follows Mori, a guy who likes to keep to himself, who discovers he has a passion for climbing one day when his classmates egg him on to climb the side of the school's building. He scales the side of the wall with ease and is a natural talent. We also discover he's quite reckless and is an adrenaline junkie because he does so without a harness on. But he catches the bug for climbing nonetheless, and it awakens something with him and he finds a purpose. Of course, nothing is ever this simple though, because this manga is very psychological as well. Mori won't just have to overcome the physical mountains that stand before him, but the ones that are in his mind also, and this is very relatable. This is one where the story is conveyed a lot through the art, particularly later on in the story because there's quite a bit of dialogue early on, and with art as beautiful as what's seen in The Climber, one can hardly complain. The panels are absolutely breathtaking, some of the best I've ever seen, and they invoke an emotional response when viewing them, and in turn really hone in how these moments must feel to Mori as well. Everything about it is just so well done and beautifully executed, and I would love to see this one translated someday. Out of all the comedy series I have my eye on, Sket Dance by Kenta Shinohara, who is the author behind another favorite of mine, Astra Lost in Space, is my most wanted. The story follows a group of high schoolers in a club called Sket that take on a series of requests and jobs submitted by their fellow students. Kinda like Odd Jobs and Gintama, but set in a school, and the relatedness here makes a lot of sense given that Kento Shinohara was an assistant of Hideaki Sarachi. But this doesn't mean it doesn't stand apart on its own. It's definitely different, but I love the two for similar reasons. As a huge fan of Gintama, I was in search of something that would fill the gap in my heart, and Sket Dance was just what I needed. Filling the void I had and then some for a fun, enjoyable comedy that also has its fair share of heartwarming moments and a cast of characters that you can't help but love. The characters are just incredible, how they interact with one another, how different they are personality-wise, yet how they complement one another is another highlight of this series. Sket Dance is humorous and made me laugh more times than I can count, but it will make you tear up a lot also. It just hits all the right notes for me and is one of my favorites. It's one that's super underrated for how amazing it is, and I really hope we get a translated release someday. For me, this next one, Holy Land, is reminiscent of all of the delinquent stories I enjoy mixed with a story about fighting, more specifically street fighting. The fighting styles in this manga are vast, from boxing to judo, so the opponents that Yu comes up against force him to think differently, to adapt quickly in the situation, and this makes it an interesting and unique read from all of the other manga I've read that involve fighting. Holy Land was a very educational experience because everything is explained really well, but it's done in a way that doesn't feel sterile at all. The story unfolds beautifully, it gets straight into the thick of things, but still gives you enough backstory that you feel connected to the characters. Holy Land's MCU is one that has a somewhat typical backstory. The kid who gets bullied and wants to become a stronger type. But the way he goes about becoming stronger is not typical at all. He heads out into the streets at night waiting for someone to try something with him and then fights them one-on-one. He doesn't back away even though people, including himself, think of him as weak, and it's inspiring to watch him grow over the course of the series. Eventually, he attracts the attention of thugs everywhere and they dub him the Thug Hunter. People start recognizing his face and target him, so bigger and stronger opponents come out of the woodwork to challenge him. He also gains the attention of Masaki Izawa, an incredible boxer who hangs out in the streets. He's astounded by Yu's raw talent but recognizes his flaws, and he becomes a mentor of sorts to him. So it's not just Yu that makes this story, but those he meets along the way as well. Others start recognizing a difference in Yu, even though he doesn't even recognize it in himself, and eventually he makes friends, most notably Shin, who is an incredible guy and awesome character by the way, and as he fights on the streets, he comes more and more to life, but all of this violence of course has its consequences. It's one of my favorites and one that has long been wished for by many, including myself. It was completed in 2008, so it's been a long time coming for this one, and I'm holding out hope that we'll get a print release with English translation one day. Beelzebub is another manga that I hope gets translated soon, although this is another that has been a long time coming. The manga was cancelled unfortunately due to low sales, but it's still a favorite of mine to this day. It's already been adapted into an anime, so it's another that while I feel maybe a long shot, is one I want to continue shining the spotlight on. The story follows our MC, Tatsumi Oga, your everyday delinquent, but everything changes for him one day when he stumbles upon the baby demon lord Beelzebub IV, who essentially chooses him to be his adoptive parent on Earth. Beelzebub is ridiculously funny, over the top with a hilariously overpowered MC, and to top it all off, it has awesome battles. Not entirely just a comedy though, and it does have substance to it. It does get more serious over the course of the chapters, but never loses its sense of humor along the way and has incredible characters. Close behind Sket Dance, though, is another comedy set in school, Psyche K. This one really captured my attention because our main character has psychic powers, and man, the list of what he can do with his abilities is long. He's incredibly overpowered yet feels no need to use them, and he's trying to keep this all a secret from his classmates, which only adds to the story's humor and charm. If you have yet to check this one out, it's somewhere in the vein of Hinamatsuri and Mob Psycho 100 for me, so if you enjoy manga like these, Psyche K is most likely right up your alley. One thing I love about Psyche K is its pacing. It's really fast-paced, but nothing feels rushed because the events that happen in the manga occur in Psyche's everyday life. Since life is unpredictable, so is Psyche K. That's actually probably one of the best ways to describe this series, unpredictable, because you never know what's going to happen next, whether it be in regards to the story or its humor. It's just one of those really feel-good, never fails to cheer me up types of series. It has a special place in my heart because of this. I really hope we get a translated print release soon, but it has a great anime adaptation if you'd like to check that out in the meantime. Moving on from a really feel-good manga to, well, a not-so-feel-good manga, Rainbow. That being said, while it's not a feel-good story, it's a truly effective one that's an absolute masterpiece through and through, and the connection and friendship that grows between the characters does shine some light in the darkness, even if ever so slightly. It's one that hit me really hard, and I will never forget it. I'm starting to think a print release with English translation may be a pipe dream given that the anime released in 2010 and the manga completed in the same year. It's still one I see constantly hoped for by many, including myself, so I'm trying my best to remain hopeful. Rainbow follows 6 teenagers who are imprisoned in a juvenile detention center and meet Sakuragi, who is the oldest of the group and entered juvie before them. He's really good at boxing too and takes these boys under his wing, helping them navigate this extremely corrupt and messed up world they're in. This manga is absolutely brutal. Many horrible and unbelievable things happen to the characters in this manga, so it's a tough read. Even though it has a dark tone, the relationship between these 7, as well as the incredible storytelling and art that's present in the series, kept me reading. It's one of my top manga, and I hope this amazing series gets an English translated release one day. Up next is Rikuto, a unique boxing manga that is edgier than most. And I mean that as a compliment. As I've said before on the channel, when I call something edgy, it's a positive for me. Because not only do I prefer these types of series, but they also tend to breathe new life into a genre and do something that's unexpected. Not that those that came before it were doing anything wrong by any means, but that they came along and provide a refreshing take. This is something I always look for. I think that's what I love about Rikuto so much, is that it excites me, it feels fresh, and it shines a light, and I mean a floodlight on the dark side to boxing. It's highly underrated, partially because it's somewhat overshadowed by the classics that came before it, but also because it's one that I feel a lot of people have yet to hear of. Rikuto is one that would be extremely successful if it were to be released with English translation. It's the best boxing manga in my opinion to release as of late. Onani Master Kurosawa is one of my favorite manga. I feel it's a one that a lot of people have yet to delve into because it's a doujinshi or a self-published manga. But even though I feel like it flies under a lot of people's radar as a result, it's one that has also received a lot of praise since its release back in 2007. I long for a translated print release of Onani Master Kurosawa because it's such a masterpiece and it definitely deserves one. If you are new to this one, the series follows high school student Kakeru Kurosawa, who keeps to himself and, as the title suggests, wanks a lot in his free time, of all places, the girls' bathroom at his school, which is commonly unoccupied. Yes, you heard that right. He is interrupted one day when these really lame popular girls come in to bully a girl named Aya Kitahara. Triggered by this, he decides to get payback on the bullies by leaving them a surprise on their uniforms. He's pleased with himself, but the girl who was being bullied, Kitahara, knows what he did and blackmails him into doing her biddings. It's really psychological, and there's a lot of growth that happens in this story with the characters. It's one that's often misjudged by its title as well, which is part of the reason why I love it so much. You go in thinking one thing perhaps about it, essentially judging a book by its cover, and realize it's so much more. Off first impression, some may think it's an erotic comedy, but it isn't. What Onani Master Kurosawa is instead is a manga that will make you feel all sorts of emotions, that develops incredibly with characters that develop incredibly as well, and a wholesome coming-of-age story that will dig deep into your heart. I love stories that are set in a certain era and have a rich history, one that's told and conveyed through its characters. Vinland Saga is one of my favorite manga, so it's no secret that I'm a fan of these types of manga, and it comes as no surprise that this next one, Kingdom, is at the top of my wish list. I have a feeling this is at the top of most people's wish lists, so in that way it probably comes as no surprise as well. Kingdom follows a boy named Shen who aspires to one day be the greatest general in all of China and the journey he takes to try and achieve that goal. It's a manga where every moment feels necessary. It's carefully and well crafted, with incredible character development. It keeps you on the edge of your seat and wanting more, has a powerful dialogue and inspirational speeches, and has some of the most amazing art with well-drawn intricate battles as well as interesting foes and strategies. It's one of those manga that just gets better and better as you read it, and it always continues to raise the bar, so it's an exciting read. In my opinion, it is still severely underhyped for how wonderful it is, and it's one I'd love to see translated. This next one is the one I want the most. It is Chigon. Maneyuki Kaneshiro is a name you probably already heard because he's the writer of Blue Lock, another that would have made this list if it weren't for the fact that, excitingly, Kodansha announced that they are physically releasing the series in August. There are actually a lot of manga written by Muneyuki Kaneshiro that I would love to see translated one day, including Bakutachi ga Yaramashita, Kami-sama no Itori, and Billion Dogs. I want them all, but Chigon is my most wanted of the bunch right now, partially because it has elements of sci-fi horror that make it similar to others I love like Gaunt's and Parasite. But while it's reminiscent of those and is right up my alley as a result, it is very much its own thing. It's easy to compare Chigon to Parasite because the MCs are both infested by parasites which normally take over their hosts, but in both cases, they manage to somewhat control it. In Chigon, these parasites are parasitic frogs called frenzy frogs that morph their hosts in these terrifying visions and once turned, are appropriately called fractured humans. The monstrous forms they take on are a representation of their deepest and strongest desires, which is unique. Similarly to Gaunt's, it's very graphic in nature. It's bloody, gory, shocking at times, and it holds nothing back. There's also a great deal of mystery in both too. That being said, if you enjoy manga like these, you'll definitely enjoy Chigon. One of the things I love most about Chigon is the fact that his MC isn't your typical MC. He's actually quite flawed and has a lot of room for growth, which makes him a believable character. Your first impressions of him might not be all that great, but he's still relatable, especially in the way that he views life. Plus, you just know he's going to grow and develop as a person in the volumes to come, and man, he does and then some, so character development is one of Chigon's strong suits. Not to mention that has some of the best art I've ever seen and some of my favorite panels in all of manga. Sometimes there are pretty wild facial expressions which really mirror the character's inner feelings well, and are all too reminiscent of series like I Am a Hero. But it's the designs of the fractured humans that I love the most. They are nightmarish and really well done, and they really do bring the host's innermost desires to light in a physical form. On top of all that, the fights are extremely well drawn. It's just out there in the best way possible, and I love it so much. These are the ones that are at the top of my list. That being said, I do have some notable mentions that I love to see as well. Those other series I'd love to see being Bjor's Trinity by Oh Great, Sunken Rock, Ace of Diamond, Sengoku Yoko, Dolly Kill Kill, which was digitally released by Kodansha with English translation and is by the artist of Blue Rock, Yusuke Nomura. In addition to those, I'd love to see Mobile Suit Moon Gundam, Crows, Aoashi, and Giant Killing. Both of those have been released with English translation digitally, but haven't gotten a physical release yet. And finally, I'd love to someday own English copies of Billy Bat, Oshinoko, and Akumetsu as well. And there you have it, guys. These are all of the manga I want to see most with English translation. What about you guys? Drop your wish list in the comments below. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.